You said, and we do have a quorum. Heath had a conflict, a last minute conflict this morning. And Donna has to scoot off early. So I'm going to go ahead and move into getting our some of our tasks taken care of, excuse me, while they're still here and while we have a quorum, just in case. And that would be approval of the September minutes. Did everyone get a copy? Any updates or corrections to those?
Karen, one quick correction. In the list of collaborators, it says Black Girls Do Bike. I think it's Black Girls Run, and I think Black Girls Run, and then there's a Girls on the Run.
So yeah, the Black Girls Run is that organization. Thank you. And we didn't talk about Girls on the Run, but I think that's a good one to put on. Not that this is a complete list, but that's a good one to mention too.
Right. I was trying to figure out what we were going after on that one, so I didn't know if we were mixing those two together or anyway. Okay.
There is a Black Girls Do Bike.
Yeah, I think it's two separate groups.
They are.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, AJ, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Doing well, thanks.
I guess that wouldn't be a correction then, so I move to approve them as they're written.
Okay. So Carol approves. Do we have or motion to approve? Do we have a second for the September minutes?
I'll second.
Thanks, AJ.
And I will go through the roster then and just indicate your vote for the approval of the minutes. I don't think we have Keith with us. Greg, how do you vote?
Approve.
Carol made the motion. Michael, how do you vote?
Approved.
Donna? Oh, Donna, how do you vote?
Approve.
All right. Scott, how do you vote?
Approve.
Sharon?
Approve.
And Joshua, how do you vote?
Approve.
Okay. Great. Unanimous?
Thank you all. Thanks. So sorry for diving into that quickly, but I did want to do that while we had a quorum, just in case anyone else has to slip off. Thanks for being here another month into the year. Matthew sent out the agenda as always, and I'm going to go a little bit off agenda here because I've been thinking about the whole concept of a communication plan, and then looking back over our the goals that we set back in April, which feels like a long time ago now, around communication, and then also just trying to get a grasp on what's feasible and logical without us going into 20 different rabbit holes and really just getting overwhelmed and feeling like we can't accomplish anything. Because communication, I mean, that's a huge undertaking if we call it communication. I like that Matthew sort of called this networking. I don't remember exactly how you phrase that, but it's more networking or maybe even a community engagement plan. When I look back at some of the conversations we've had over the past year and the goal number 3 that we had stated at the time back in April, we had set aside, we said we intend to serve as advocates and liaisons to improve awareness around pedestrian safety laws and trail use etiquette throughout the Winston-Salem community. Includes, but is not limited to, supporting program growth for safe routes to school, promoting the Watch for Me NC education, which is really kind of a driver education for bike pedestrian safety, learning and modeling proper signaling and safety habits ourselves and encouraging others to do the same, knowing and sharing ways to provide community input. So like Keith talked about, the ruts around Salem Lake and how and where to report that. Or I had one this week that I sent to Matthew around the height differentiation from the bridges, some of the bridges on our greenways and the actual ground surface. Highlighting walking, running, and cycling paths throughout the community to promote a healthier community. Working with the city, and I can keep going, there's 2 more here, but my point is this is already a really long list, so I'm going to circle back to that theme. Working with the city social media team to create messaging around trail and road access, and then networking safety information through our circles. I've got this long laundry list of communication and engagement related topics. And so before we dive into like creating partnerships or talking about communicating, which may or may not necessarily be our responsibility, I want to have kind of an honest check-in with all of you around capacity, for one. So we meet monthly, but we don't do a lot outside of that. How many of you have time to do more outside of our monthly meetings? And if so, what does that look like to you as individuals? Because that could look like a lot of different things. And then within that very realistic capacity, how do we need to break this out to actually have something that we can take action on? And I'll pause with that. We've talked about communicating, which I don't think is our responsibility. I think we said it right, that it's our response. We intend to serve as advocates and liaisons to improve awareness. So that's the networking and building relationships with other groups and having that sort of phone tree list that someone mentioned of other leaderships. And then we've talked about reaching out to other bicycle, pedestrian committees across the state, and we have a list of those, which Matthew has gotten us all the context for. So I'm just going to pause and just do kind of a check-in, if you don't mind, and say our meetings as they are monthly. What feels right to you as individuals? And if you were to do things outside of our monthly meetings, what time and capacity do you have and what interest do you have in being available? And then from there, we'd like to talk about how many of you could potentially reach out and have a 30-minute conversation with another group out there, another city BPAC. How many of you might be interested in or have other things that you're thinking about in the back of your mind that you'd like to do, like research or pulling together a spreadsheet as AJ and Carol did earlier this year? What does that look like to you? And I think if it's okay, I could just go, I don't want to put you on the spot. This is not a pressure and this is a we're not doing anything. This is in reality, what can we do in the limited capacity that each of us have? And what does doing more feel like to each of us as individuals? Does that make sense? And then from there, I think we can figure out what a liaison and advocacy effort looks like, and then what does, I'm going to try to find another word to use other than communication, maybe it's awareness building look like from the capacity that we have. Matthew, obviously I'm going to skip you even though you're next to me in the picture lineup here. AJ, do you mind?
Sure. You may have to remind me what the different questions are, but I'll just start, I guess. I'm definitely open to doing more outside of the monthly meetings in terms of what that capacity actually looks like. I mean, I think it's going to vary, but I guess safely, like I'd commit to just, we spend an hour 1 week each month in this meeting, and I'm happy to at least start by just, spending an hour each week. So that's like 3 or 4 other hours each month in between meetings to kind of move stuff along. But likely more. I'm definitely interested in moving things along. And yeah, as far as I guess what that looks like, reaching out to other cities that have committees or other organizations in our town, thinking about that communication list. And now I'm forgetting if there was another question. I feel like I'm veering off.
No, that was it.
Okay. All right.
And you demonstrated my point, how easy it is to just veer off into this nebulous zone of communicate.
It's a lot of stuff under that umbrella.
Yeah, yeah. Scott?
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested. I know there, especially at Wake Forest, there is a group that's very interested in this and has formed kind of a partnership looking at some funding options of studying the problem in an academic sense. I think engaging a group like that, also engaging all of the bicycle advocacy groups that exist in Winston-Salem. Obviously, my proclivity is more towards cycling, but also I'm certainly open to discussing with the pedestrian community, continuing, because that's part of our mission, and continuing to work with them. But I certainly like the idea of engaging outside groups, again, because there's a lot of interest. One of the orthopedic surgeons, Tygo Guerra, is very interested in this, has done a lot of work on this, and has actually helped put together a group to help not only study this, but also recommend and make changes within the community. He's a very vocal member of the advocacy community here about safety, and as we all are. Certainly, too, I'd be interested in the other aspect, which I brought up earlier, which is to engage enforcement as well. I like the idea of, certainly separating pedestrian and bicycle traffic from cars, because it's pretty clear that there's a pretty lack of awareness with cars about pedestrians. I've seen it multiple times just in the last week of people running crosswalks and folks having near misses and things like that, people getting close to me while I'm riding, not observing the law of 3 feet. And so certainly I think enforcement needs to be part of this, because if there aren't any consequences for driver behavior, there's not going to be any change. So that to me is an important piece of this, certainly not the most important piece, and certainly not to stymie educational efforts. But that's where I see. And again, I'm happy to help outside the meetings and engage other groups. I think that's a really good idea that you brought up, Sharon. So thank you.
Sure. And Scott, am I correct in sort of that your participation outside our monthly meetings, and even for our monthly meetings due to your surgery schedule, do you think that you could potentially schedule a 30-minute call with another committee outside of Winston-Salem, or is your engagement more of a just as you are out there writing and interacting just kind of on a daily basis, just scheduling wise, what does that look like for you? Is it all over the place?
Yeah, no, I understand. As long as it's set up on my non-clinical days or evenings or weekends, it works out fine. It's just the middle of the day, I have clinical responsibilities, and so it makes it virtually impossible, because I'm kind of tied to the hospital. I don't get opportunities to leave, or with patients under my care, I can't make meetings generally. So, but as long as I have flexibility, I mean, I have usually one non-clinical day a week when I can schedule things, and that floats, so it's not set. That's what makes it challenging. But evenings and weekends are usually pretty open. So, yeah, I mean, I think that would be fine. A 30-minute call would not be a problem at all.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Michael, what does capacity feel like for you right now? And as far as doing things outside of monthly meetings?
Yeah, I'm not very proficient at spreadsheets and stuff like that, but I definitely can make phone calls. With me, I have pretty flexible schedule. I typically need, days notice with meetings, but I can plan all that and schedule that. I guess my thinking is there a framework to these discussions that provide a consistency across the board for all of us? As we just mentioned, it's easy to get on tangents. So, a 30-minute conversation can fly by, and we might not achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve through the conversation. Not that can just go back to a third conversation. But I think for me, if we could collectively come up with the framework, I mean, I could make 2 or 3 phone calls a week and feel pretty good about that. That certainly enhances, my position at the cycling center and just helps me, increase my involvement there as well. So it's
sure.
Yeah, I definitely would have the capacity for that and enjoy those types of engagement, via phone, Zoom, in person if possible. So.
And that's really what, not even just about the conversations with other committees out there, those 30-minute calls, but just in a general sense, do you have freedom and flexibility to do other tasks outside of our monthly meeting? And what are those things you enjoy? So knowing that you really enjoy the sort of, say, person-to-person interaction, where someone else might really like that data piece. I think that if we can know that about ourselves, then we can create some work groups, not subcommittees, but just work groups who can get together outside of these regular meetings to focus on some area of that. So I really appreciate that you said that you enjoy those. Not that we're going to now dump them all on you, but that's great to know. Not everyone does, and we don't want someone to feel like they're going to have to do something that's really uncomfortable to them that they don't like doing. And so I'll just to go back to your question, we do have a sample list of questions, and we're going to discuss those. But what we might also do is, if there are, say, 3 or 4 people who really enjoy those conversations and want to have those conversations more so than others, then perhaps those people take that list of questions off and hone them down themselves as a work group outside of our monthly meeting. I'm going to come back to that though. Donna, what does your capacity look like, and what are the things that you would like to do more outside of the regular monthly meetings? I'm going to rephrase my question.
I enjoy being out. So in terms of my capacity, I don't mind being out in the community. For example, my biggest thing, I bike a little, and I used to run, but I walk more now. So they have all kinds of events that happen throughout the year that I actually really enjoy, like the turkey strut. And, you got the mistletoe, which is all coming back, and there's lots of people around. And I think what I like is more community engagement. So even having the MC, and I'm sorry, having the MC let them know that, we're here, and even kind of giving some of our messaging, just kind of building those kind of relationships so that it just seems like that's something naturally that they do over and over again now, talk about these initiatives, safety, go see such and such and make sure, you're getting involved in creating these types of opportunities. So I think for me, probably more community engagement, along with maybe having the capacity for maybe one conversation every other week with other organizations similar to this to get information. But like Michael, I don't. I am good at spreadsheets. I don't want to do what I do at work. So I don't want to do spreadsheets.
Okay.
And things like that. But definitely
Sure.
conversations and community engagement would be
Okay.
the two areas.
Right. I'm sort of seeing some themes emerging, and I'm also watching the time because I don't want to take a huge amount of time on this, where we might have a group that's emerging that really wants to have those personal conversations, and then we might have some folks who are more interested in doing maybe online research, comparison, pulling together the information that we get from these conversations and pulling that together into something that we can all look at and compare side by side. Greg, any preference or restrictions on your capacity and what you might be interested in doing outside of these monthly meetings?
Well, like everyone else here, we're pretty busy with committees and activities and family and personal things going on. To be straight, I'm already sort of at a capacity right now as far as what I can commit to. Excuse me. Pardon me. I'm more of a project by project type of a person. Like if with the cycling classic, I was able to help out a little bit and commit some time to, help with various aspects of the setup and monitoring of people that attended the event and things of that nature. I'm more of a project by project time commitment type person right now. On a number of committees. I'm on another city committee that involves a modest amount of time, but I'm also really involved with trying to implement the multi-use path that is planned along the Business 40 or Salem Parkway project and the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive streetscape project. Those are two projects that Matthew Burchick and myself have both worked on, and I have a strong interest in seeing those things through, and I've spent a modest amount of time in various conversations and promoting those items and working with the Creative Corridors Coalition, of which I'm a member as well. So it's more of a project by project time commitment for myself. I try to plan my time as best I can and to do as much as I can, but I'm also on other committees. So I'll be straight with you. I don't want to sound like I'm whining or anything like that, but I'm just at a maximum capacity, I think, as far as taking on additional projects and time commitments. I enjoy participating in meetings like this and reading the materials and responding as needed, and being sort of Matthew Burchick's backup guy. Since I worked with him, I enjoy working with him, and that's one of the whole reasons I'm on this committee, because I enjoy working with him and the issues involved here. But beyond that, my time commitment are on the project, as well as being part of the Winston-Salem CAN, the Cycling Advocacy Network. group, and also the Cycle Recycle Ministry group. So I'm also involved in those other sort of related committees and helping out with their activities. And so I'm not trying to beg out of being involved more with this committee, but I'm just being straight with you all that I'm
No, that's exactly why I asked, and thank you. And I think you've just outed yourself as someone who can bring back really valuable information to this group at the, where we have that open call for updates at the end of our meeting each month, or try to. Some of those groups are going to be doing work that's going to be really of strong interest and connectivity for us. And so knowing that you have those connections is fabulous.
I would really like to see those committees and our group be more connected in interactions. I think there's value there, and I think there's strength in numbers, and I hate to sort of see us all kind of going in separate directions, doing somewhat of the same types of projects and programs and efforts. I'd like to maximize our people power and our time. So.
Right. And yeah, exactly. I think that's our goal as we move into this next few months of sorting out what that looks like. Thank you. Joshua, same thing. We're just from a capacity checkpoint outside of monthly meetings, any particular interest, restrictions, or ideas for you?
Hey, yeah, so I'll be brief. One, yeah, I would be happy to help out in any way I can. I think the capacity, I could probably say another, formally another hour a month or 30 minutes every other week. I'd be happy to jump on calls or attend some meetings. But also, I think, I forget who it was, maybe it was Ms. Jones, that, my passion is really community engagement, reaching out into the community, and almost to say, as I've got my health director hat on, one of those hats is part of that is the bicycle and pedestrian advocacy. So wherever I'm at, if there's places, whether it's I'm giving a presentation to Rotary, getting a lot of people want a lot of visibility from public health due to COVID pandemic, but want to keep advocating for bicycle and pedestrian issues and just those systems issues that go into not only making it better for cyclists, but also for pedestrians and unfortunately all the fatalities we've seen in the past year. So yeah, be happy to help out.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful for me to know, just as we're talking about what things look like moving forward, and how I think several of us have voiced wanting to do more between meetings, but what that actually looks like, we haven't really talked about. So I think that helps give a clear idea. I'm going to back up just a minute because I actually skipped. Well, let me do this. Carol has put together a draft list of questions that we could use in building out conversations with other similar committees in other locations. Thanks, Donna. Have a good week or rest of the month. We have a list of communities out there that have had really strong BPAC committees. We identified Cary, I think Raleigh, Asheville, Greensboro. I'm not going to remember the list off the top of my head. And Matthew has gotten contact information for each of those committees through his peer within those city municipality governments. So I think it would be of the best use of our time, maybe, well, you guys tell me, we could look at those questions now and try to determine from that list a sort of final set that would guide those conversations. Or we could have a group of you look at those questions outside our meeting, that group would be the folks who are also volunteering to make phone calls. And then you guys schedule your calls. You see what I'm saying? Do we want to look at the questions now as a full group, or do we want to raise our hands and say, we're going to be the folks who are going to make these phone calls? We'll look at the questions, we'll come up with a list, and then we'll divide and conquer that way and report back on our December meeting. What's the best use of time now?
It feels to me like it'd be helpful to at least look at, I don't know how many folks are going to end up doing those calls or how many of us won't be, I guess. I don't know what else we would do with the time instead to know if that's the best use, but it seems like we could at least spend a little bit of time looking at it.
Okay. I do want to be able to do the micromobility update. So we could maybe do like 10 minutes looking at the questions real quick. And I'm going to, Carol, do you have them up in front of you if we let you share by chance?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Make sure I pick the right one. I have a lot of things open.
I do too.
I think it's this one.
I'm going to say my eyesight is terrible, so I cannot see those.
I know it's really tiny. I'm trying to figure out how to make that larger.
Okay, so if you're looking at your screen, I just found on the left side, there's a, that you as individuals can blow them up a little bit too. So I think that takes it off the screen for me.
Carol, you can zoom in a little bit. You can see in the lower right-hand corner, there's that sliding bar for the zoom level. If you just move that to the right a little bit, it should enlarge that.
It is so tiny on my screen, Matthew.
I'm talking about in Word itself.
I can see my big copy, but I can't see what I sent to y'all.
That's okay. I'm gonna read them off then, I think. Or I'm gonna try to. Oh, I can see it now. I'm not sure if I did that or someone else did that.
Okay, I don't know what I did. The one that I see I'm sharing is still tiny, but I can see mine.
Okay, okay.
So, and I can blow mine up if that makes yours any larger.
So our goal in these conversations would be to find out, or in my head, we want to know how they've been able to do some of the things that they've done. Who do they link with? How do they create action? And what does that action look like? So the questions that, and Carol, thank you for coming up with these. How long has your committee existed? This might be the first version. How long has your committee existed and how long have you been a member of the committee? Who is your city liaison? Sorry.
Yeah, my thought there was, last meeting, Matthew mentioned that this is a transportation committee focused on that. And so are they actually reporting into their city liaison? Are they involved in transportation, or are they more involved in safety and advocacy, or are they maybe like Joshua, the health representative for the company, the county? So who, or the city? So who's their city liaison, which might cause a difference in their focus and what our focus is. And Matthew, maybe we can skip that because you know who the city liaison is for all of those. But I just thought it would start enhancing that, break the ice a little bit and enhance the conversation that we have with them, was my thought.
Sorry, I'm trying to get back to my new windows again. This next, do you have a mission statement? And does your committee have defined goals? I really like those questions, or at least that direction, in determining, have they set, apart from what's defined in our charter, which if you look at the city website where they list our committee, that statement is right there. Apart from that, how and what goals have they created for themselves, and maybe even how often they review those goals? Is it annual, or do they have they done kind of a strategic plan for their group where they've got 3-year goals, that kind of thing? What does a typical meeting look like? Is one of your focus areas communication, and what messages are you trying to communicate? Is there a focus on safety? Thank you. How do your committee support safety? Is your committee involved in safe routes to school, all kids bike? And what accomplishments do you have that you're most proud of?
I thought that last question might get them to open up and talk freely for a while.
Any initial, are there questions you feel like could be dropped here? Are there, personally, I want the conversation to be broad but still get valuable information. And so maybe taking out communication and just focusing more on what are your broad goals, accomplishments, and how you've made things happen in some way. But I'm going to stop talking and let other people talk again.
I think one thing that we may kind of get to with some of these questions, and I guess what we're kind of thinking about is communication. Like we said earlier, it's a really big, broad thing. But is understanding how the committees work outside of their scheduled committee meetings. So are they at city council meetings speaking every so often? What other things are they doing to engage in the public? I'm guessing their meetings are probably also all open to the public, but that's not necessarily a huge place where there's a lot of engagement. So
correct.
I think that's the biggest opportunity for us to understand what other committees have done successfully to actually connect in those areas. And I feel like that kind of has to come before understanding what messages they've been trying to communicate, is just how they're even going about doing that.
Yeah, I like that, AJ. So how do you engage outside of your monthly meetings?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that goes two ways. Like that goes to the city council or whatever liaison or government body, but also with the public.
Yep. Yep. So the way I wrote that down was, how do you engage outside of monthly meetings as a committee? And that would be like, do you have work groups? Do you have subcommittees? Do you attend city council meetings? Those kinds of things. And then how do you engage with the community? Am I hearing your...
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think for whatever we hear from that, we can probe further and learn more about what that looks like.
Yep.
But I feel like that's a big piece that sticks out to me.
So how do you engage with the community might be, who are your key partners? Types of groups. Okay. Are there things
Hey, I just wanted to say, for me, I think, and I don't know what necessarily the questions would be to get at this, but to me, I'm very interested in knowing, what were your significant challenges? And I don't know if I see it on there, like, what was the tough thing that as a group, whether it was a riff in the committee or whatever, how you address that. And to me, the thing that I'm most interested in is seeing those communities that have had long-term success. Because any group can get a grant and over 2 or 3 years just go great, but those ones that have been doing it for a few decades and how they should sustain that for the long term.
I think those are great questions. There are a couple of these, like those down in the triangle, who have been in operation for quite a while, and I think that shows, in what they've been able to get done and how visible they are now. But I'm sure that just like us, they had a beginning way back when.
Building on that, I think that's a really great question that Joshua mentioned. If we're having these conversations with the members, it may be that, I don't know how old all the ones are. I think Durham's like 20 years old, their committee. The members probably didn't see the beginning of that, but maybe the liaisons did. I don't know if there's a separate or if they're involved in this conversation too, but that would be a really great question for them to understand from the outset to kind of where they are now, how it's changed or what the biggest challenges from the beginning were.
Yeah, that's a great point.
One other comment is who is the audience? Is this just in North Carolina? Because obviously now with the virtual world, I was just reading the New York Times article about the great bike paths that are like along the Erie Canal in New York, and just I don't know. I mean, I just in the virtual world, you just call, email, and set up a meeting like this. Just throw that out there.
Joshua, I had forgotten about this, but John Gunkel, who was sort of accidentally put on our committee and then removed. He was put on 2 committees at the same time and can only serve on one. So he's on the Parks and Rec committee. But while in that short time where he was on both groups, he had done some research and gotten some names of folks who are part of rail trail development or had been part of maybe a northern group. I think that's a great idea, though. There's certainly no reason to limit ourselves to North Carolina. There are some things that would be different here, like the rail trails, because we don't have the same land rights that other states do. But at the same time, if we look at Maine and Vermont, Pennsylvania or Maryland, where they have done a lot of infrastructure development and awareness and education around driver safety, I think those are great places to include on our list. And Matthew, I don't know if you have recommendations, or colleagues or people that in some of those other cities that we might add to our list.
Yeah, we could certainly come up with a list of contacts from other communities.
Okay, great. Any other immediate comments or reactions to this?
So I think these are excellent questions for all the kind of governmental agencies. But I think we would need to come up with a totally separate list of questions for independent groups. And also, too, it looks like just by AJ's comment that there's opportunity, through research, a lot of these questions might be answered just by him saying that, Durham's been in effect for 20 years. He obviously saw that somewhere or knows somebody on the inside. So I would say, before we jumped on and started fielding these questions, if there's ways to answer some of them prior, and then that could also still be part of the discussion but it's not, it might come out a little bit differently and make it more streamlined when speaking with these groups.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point too, just to keep a short list, because you are going to end up having a side conversation about something they say that's of interest. And so those things that might be present on a website, there's no reason to have them in this list.
I think, I think Carol did mention some of these questions may just serve, since we're talking to these folks for the first time, as good icebreakers and kind of lay groundwork. But definitely, Michael, I think it would be a great idea, and I'm happy to volunteer to help with this if we have that list of different committees to pull whatever we can. A lot of this should be publicly available. It's just kind of whether the city's website is intuitively easy to get around on. But yeah, it would be good to just kind of spend 10, 15 minutes and pull in whatever we can. At least that way folks have somewhere to start, and we can definitely still ask about those things, but we have that information already if we need to.
Could a few of us volunteer maybe to bounce this list around by email over the next few days to finalize it, Michael?
I'll be on that group.
Okay.
And I've already written down a handful of questions too, to kind of as we probe individual groups. And I know several members of our group are on those groups, or in those members of those groups. So, that would probably be the best place to start, just to answer some of those questions. But I still think it is important, anybody that wants to engage a group for their own interest and for the interest of the greater good. Right. I think the more we know about individual groups individually, then the better off we're going to collectively be able to, our brainstorming sessions could, produce bigger and better results, I think.
Okay. Agreed. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll, Carol, you can stop sharing and let Matthew dive in really quickly to the micromobility update. But thank you all, and we will bounce these around by email and fix my layout here. And then come up with a plan to divide out those conversations over the next few weeks. So Matthew had updates on the micromobility. As you might remember, in October, the city had just finalized the new contracts for the scooters coming into the next year, and there were a couple of changes that I think Matthew was especially excited about, which included more outreach into low-income neighborhoods and some data sharing that would be coming through those. So Matthew, I'm going to turn over to you now, and I apologize for skipping that in the beginning.
Thank you, Sharon. So yeah, just a quick update on where we stand with micromobility issues. Last year, we had two operators, Spin and Blue Duck, providing services here. And during the summer, we went through our permit application process, and the selection committee decided to offer, I should say, we received two applications again. So Spin and Blue Duck both reapplied. And that was the extent of the applications that we had received. And through the evaluation process that the selection committee went through, decided to offer a single permit to Spin to operate for this year. I think what Spin had offered and the services that they had offered and the technology they offered and the fleet size that they were offering, it all it just made the most sense and made the shared micromobility program stronger by having them be the sole operator. So Sharon mentioned some of the features that they had offered. One was an outreach, kind of a proactive outreach in our equity areas, where if essentially a program in which SPIN would proactively contact customers who begin rides in those equity areas and offer them information about possible like low income rates that they offer. So the companies all offer low income rates if somebody can prove that that they would qualify for that. And what SPIN is proposing to do is proactively reach out to people with that offer. So that was one of the features. They're also they're offering kind of a higher technology scooter that will hopefully help us address some of the sidewalk riding and parking issues. So there were some features like that would enhance the service overall, and it just made sense that they would be the provider accordingly. So one of the things I wanted to share was data from last year. I think this was our first full year of having these the electric scooters on the streets, and so our first full year of data. So let me share my screen here. I'll show you. Can everybody see that? Okay. Let's see. How about now?
Yes.
Good. I'll zoom in. Is that clear for everybody? So the companies are required to share their data with the city, and that allows us to track the seasonal variations in when people are riding and the rate at which they're riding. So you can see what we do is a monthly report on this, and since we had a full year, we took that annual statistic as well. So this was one of the items I had sent out with the agenda. So you all have this if you want to look at it a little more closely, but you can see the number of trips there, the average trips per day. Importantly, the number of devices deployed per day. And then one of the figures that the companies look closely at is the average trips per device per day. And then there's some other information about total trip distance, total trip duration, average trip distance, and average trip duration. So, those numbers aren't, I think the average trip duration, as an example, that's something that the companies look at, and depending on the duration of the trip, it kind of gives them an indication as to how people are using the devices. But going back to that average trips per device per day, you can see that number typically ranged from 0.5 to 0.6. So that means that if you have an average number of trips per device per day at 0.5, that means half of the fleet is receiving one ride per day, to give you an indication. So the companies use that to help them to determine how many devices they should deploy. You can see the annual statistics there as well. I think what I'd like to do is just open it up. Does anybody have any questions about this information?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Thanks again for sharing this, but ahead of time too, to allow us to kind of look over it. Thinking about that average number of trips per device per day, is the fleet size changing over this time? Like they're putting out more or fewer scooters day to day or month to month?
So probably not day to day. So typically day to day, those numbers are pretty static. Month to month, it may change.
Okay.
Say in the summer versus the winter. That's where we've seen some variation in that.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was confused by that column, especially seeing the highest number being in January when there's very few trips. The only way that really made sense to me is if a much smaller number of scooters were available. So
that's where that column, the average number of devices deployed per day. So you can see in January there were only 14 and 11 devices deployed.
So that's available throughout the whole city. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
That makes sense. And and thinking about the average trip duration too, because looking at that and the map that you shared too is really helpful just to try to understand where people are going on these. But I imagine that the trip duration has like a really long tail and some of the rides are very long and that's dragging that average up. Do you have access to more granular data than this, or is this kind of what you get from the vendor to know, like, do you, I guess, yeah, that's the question, I guess. Do you have more data than this, or you kind of get it in this aggregate form of average trip duration and stuff?
That's right. This is the way we receive it. I think it is anonymized, so seeing the individual statistics on rides is not something we have access to.
Yeah, I guess not being able to tie it back to a rider. I just wondered, because seeing that it makes complete sense that the highest density is right around the downtown area, but I don't really know where someone's going for 20 minutes in that area. Right. So it's just, that average seems probably not, like I would guess the median value is like a lot lower, closer to 10 minutes or something, but I don't know. I was just trying to understand what most people are doing on the scooters. It does look like from the map there's like a couple places that are a little more common for folks to travel outside of town, which feels like something to kind of dig into and understand more. But yeah, no, thanks. This is great to have.
With that, I'll share the map as well. So those few places you mentioned where there was ridership outside of downtown, one was Liberty Street to Cleveland Avenue area and Piedmont Circle, so that there is some public housing in these areas. So potentially, offering that transportation option to those areas. You can see that the ridership isn't extremely high; it's in the lower category, but there is, significant enough ridership in those areas that it does register. So I agree that one of the groups that we tried to engage with, especially with the pedestrian plan, was the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. So if we can coordinate with them and offer scooters and in those areas and stage them in those areas and provide that transportation option, that's potentially a really valuable service. Some of the other areas, along Research Parkway here towards Rams Drive and towards the WSSU campus a little bit, I think we would just need to explore and see what destinations people were trying to reach kind of at the periphery of the downtown area.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, like the work we've done on the bicycle plan, talking about those priority projects. One of those does go up to that area near North Cleveland Avenue. And so to me, this just highlights a need for transportation, regardless of how it is, to those areas. So I think it's neat to see this from micromobility, but to pull it into consideration when we look at bike and pedestrian projects too.
Certainly, yeah, because of the bike infrastructure improvements that we make on street, they'll serve not only cyclists, but scooter riders as well, because scooters are allowed to ride in bike lanes. So if we make those improvements, it's going to help more than just cyclists even.
Matthew, I'm wondering if we have any data similar to this for the bike share program to see if there's any overlap and how that looks. I know the distribution centers for bikes and scooters are totally different, but I was just wondering, since that is something that we've already engaged in, particularly I see them quite a bit out at Salem Lake, but just wondering if we have any information regarding that as well.
So
yes,
I might defer to Michael on that. Now, what I can speak to is historically, the bike share program, the data we had, for the first few years, you're right, Salem Lake was one of the very high usage areas, probably accounting for 35% or so of all rides in the system. And the trails in general, the stations located along trails performed very well. So it seemed like that was certainly an emphasis for the people using them, was that they had bikes available, and they had a very safe place to ride those bikes. So if, I don't have the specific statistics in front of me for that, but I know Michael had some statistics for the bike share program that was relaunched this year. And Michael, I don't know if you want to share any of that, but I'll leave it to you if you want to.
Sure. And I apologize. I did send you guys, at least Sharon and Matthew, but it was 5 minutes before the meeting. So not very much time. So unfortunately, I guess I haven't learned the capacity to extrapolate the data to the extent that the scooters are. And I know Zagster in the past, they were able to provide a lot more. Our software provider, Movatic, the dashboard's a bit different. And, you know, Matthew, maybe you and I can connect sometime even with Kelly and try to get you plugged into the back admin site and, yeah, maybe help me also learn, you know, how to get some of this. But I do have a lot of the raw numbers. And just to agree, Salem Lake is still by far the most popular location. And I've never shared anything. So do I just press the share button and I could even share my document that I have, that way we can look at it.
And it should give you an option to choose. Once you hit that button, you should be able to choose exactly that document. I'm looking, or I have it open if you want me to.
Yeah, if you would share it, that would be great.
Here, now that I said that, let me see if I can.
And I mean, I don't know if you can expand that or not. And I'm happy to send this to all the group, but yeah, so we kicked off in May of 2021. So I don't have any of the previous data. I mean, I probably do back in my files from the previous kind of when it was with Zagster. But as you can see, so our numbers, I think we launched late May. I can't really remember off the top. So at the start, it hit a pretty gangbuster right off the beginning. I think that was just really a couple days worth of data. But as you can see, like our numbers are not really anywhere near the numbers of the scooters. You know, our rates are a bit different. And so I don't know if there's anything specific, you know, like I said, I wasn't able to provide near as much information. And there's no GPS on the bikes. So I don't know, I wouldn't be able to extrapolate how far these distances, how far people are riding. You know, we get the time frame, and I kind of indicated that at the bottom. Yeah, the majority of the trips are for 30 to 60 minutes. And then the second most, and like I said, I'm sure I could have done some number crunching and kind of got up with some specific numbers, but I just had a glance. Yeah, it's 30 to 60 minutes is what most people are using the bikes. And then the second category was 60 to 90 minutes. So that tells me that most of our rides are coming at a recreational kind of perspective. Salem Lake, we have one of our, another really popular station is Reynolds Park. I think it just we never had a station there before. It's got high visibility, great parking, great access to the Salem Creek Greenway. So that one's been getting some great use. We put one out at Jamison Park on this Muddy Creek Greenway, and that one's getting some really good use. But by far, Salem Lake continues to be the most popular. But I'm going around every week checking the stations and moving around. So there is still a lot of activity downtown as well. You know, one day it'll be full down at Bailey Park, and the next day I'll come down there and there'll be 3 bikes. You know, and they're going all the way to West End because those stations will be full. So I'm kind of rebalancing bikes pretty frequently, every week. So I'm definitely feeling like we are getting some good usage from downtown. And I've always said that I think the scooters have been very complimentary to that, because I think a lot of people hop on the scooters before they would hop on the bikes. And then it just kind of gets them into that mindset of the quick transportation across town. And then gradually they've gone over to joining the bike share because they're used to downloading the app and putting the information and jumping on it. And, we're dealing with, our equipment is older. We've bought our stuff that was all left over. So we've had a few struggles with some of the equipment that have kind of led to unsatisfied customers, but I'm weekly on the dashboard and responding to those folks that have any kind of complaints or concerns. And a lot of times I'm every time that anybody, if they deserve it or desire a refund, I certainly refund them. We want to make sure that they're feeling heard and validated. But overall, I feel like it's been a great success. We work through these. A lot of the issues are just with the locks. They're just kind of old and temperamental. And for me, when I go to a station, I'm very used to it. I'm calm and I know what I've already troubleshooted a lot of things. So it seems to work out fine. But what I'm finding is folks that show up for the first time, it's not as easy as I would hope it is. So we're working through that. We've just got Flo just sent me a promo video that they just completed yesterday. So we're going to try to start pushing that out there as well. So yeah, overall, we're really pleased with it. We feel like things are going good. We certainly want, to continue to grow in popularity. But we're also looking, already kind of thinking about expanding into, providing more stations and picking up some more bikes as well.
Great. Remind me, Michael, how many stations and how many bikes do you have right now?
So in theory, we have 22 stations and 100 bikes.
Okay.
In reality, I think we have about 17 or 18 stations active. I should know that exactly, but and then about, we're constantly having to fix bikes. So typically out on the streets, we typically have at least 75 bikes out at once.
Okay.
Across the network.
Okay. We are over time, but I really appreciate Michael, you pulling that together last minute and being willing to share what you had on that. I think it's really interesting to see how these layer together. And AJ brought up some great points about how the map especially highlights the recommendations and conversations that we had about the pedestrian plan and the bike plan. So, thanks, Matthew. I flip-flopped our meeting and hopefully didn't completely confuse anyone by doing that, but I do think we had good conversation as always. We're going to circulate questions among those of us who mentioned that they'd be willing to look at that. And if you're okay with this, we'll continue that conversation by email and get folks engaged in starting to have some of those external liaison conversations. Sound good? Okay. See you all in December. Hope the rest of the month is great and enjoy the next few hours of warm weather before it dips cold again. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good Thanksgiving, Sharon.
Thanks.
Okay.
Take care.